Hey everyone, my name is Michelle and in this video I'm going to tell you all about the books that I've read in July. So it's time for my July reading wrap up and I can tell you July has been amazing. I've read some amazing books. I have two new favorites, two 5-star reads. I have a couple of 4-star reads. I just had the best time reading this month, which is amazing because I feel like it had been ages since I had a reading phase like that where I'm just consistently reading books that I enjoy as well. So very happy with July as a reading month. So I think I'm not going to make this intro too long and just get to it and tell you all about the 7 books that I managed to finish in July. The first one that I finished I've talked about before, and it is The Rose Coat by Kate Quinn. As of right now, this is my favorite book of the year, and The Rose Coat is another historical fiction book by Kate Quinn. It takes place during the Second World War and it takes place at Bletchley Park, which was this mansion where there were lots of people working to break the war codes and to transcribe messages and such. And this book follows 3 young women who work at Bletchley Park. They are close friends, but then at the end of the war something happens that drives them apart. Which brings us to the second timeline, which is interwoven in between the first timeline, which takes place in 1947, when it's almost the wedding of Prince Philip and Princess Elizabeth, and apparently it turns out that there may have been a traitor at Bletchley Park. So yeah, this book, amazing. I've talked about it in the video where I ranked all the books that I've read so far this year, and this book was number 1. I enjoyed it so much. It was interesting, there were funny moments, there were emotional moments. With the 3 main characters, you were just so invested in them. What I especially loved is that you learned so much about how Bletchley Park worked and how you needed so many types of people. Of course, you needed the smart ones or like the very brainy ones who knew how to decipher certain codes, but you also needed secretaries and you needed translators and you needed people who worked the machines there. It was kind of a community, and it's so interesting to read about, but at the same time it is amazing to follow these different stories, and there is tension and intrigue and you know that something is going to happen, but it's going to take a while until you actually get to that point, which is just, it makes you sit on the edge of your seat the entire time. I loved it. I just love Kate Quinn books in general. I think that's probably no secret by now, but this is another amazing one. If you love historical fiction and you love World War II books, then this will be right up your alley. And I basically have nothing but good words about this book, so maybe a bit of a boring review because it's just me gushing about it, but that's the truth. That's just what I experienced, and it was amazing. And then the next book that I finished was also one that I very much enjoyed, and that is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. And this is another historical fiction book, and this one tells the story of Hamnet Shakespeare, who was the son of William Shakespeare. So at the beginning of the book, Hamnet finds his twin sister Judith to be very ill and he runs out to get some help. But what his family does not know is that at the end of the week it won't be Judith, but it will be Hamnet who will not survive it. This is not a spoiler, this is literally on the back of the book. That's like sort of the premise you're working with. And it's also true to history that Hamnet Shakespeare died at the age of 11, but it's not known how he died. So this book kind of gives its own interpretation of this boy's life and what happened, and it's also very much about his mother, who was named Anne or Agnes. Like, there's sort of a discussion about that, but in the book she's called Agnes, and it's very much about her life, how she met William Shakespeare, how they got married, and how she is a bit different than most women. It's actually interesting because William Shakespeare does appear in the book, but he's never named. Like, the name Shakespeare or William is never actually said. He's sort of like a side character in this story, even though he's the only reason that we find these people interesting in the first place, which is sort of a very interesting reading experience. But apart from that, this book is just, it's very wonderful because it's very lyrical and poetical, and it's not fast-paced, it's definitely very slow. So I'll immediately say that I can understand that this book won't be for everybody, but if you love that kind of slow, beautiful writing, then this is the book for you. And me personally, I enjoyed it a lot. It is not really a binge book, it's something that you have to take your time with. Just enjoy the experience and how it is being told. The emotions and the motivations and just everything that is going on with this family. It is so beautiful. I loved it. I definitely think it's almost like a piece of art. Like, this writing, it's just exquisite. And It is, again, definitely a certain type of book. It has to be your thing. But it was my thing, which is why I gave this book as well 5 stars. It is also amazing. It is just just, wow, so wonderful. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say about it, apart from, yes, it is slow, but to me, it was wonderful. The next book that I finished was a very old reread, and it's a Dutch book by a Dutch author, and it's called De Tweeling by Tessa de Loo, which would translate as The Twins. Before I start to review it, I've talked about this book in my translations, book recommendations from Dutch books who have been translated into English, and this is one of them. So if you want to hear more about that, you can watch that video. But yeah, De Tweeling, The Twins. It is a story about twin girls who were separated at the age of 6. One of them ended up living in Germany and the other in the Netherlands, and then World War II happens, which of course makes their experiences with life very different. The framing device of this book is that as elderly women, they accidentally meet each other at this spa in France. Again, not a spoiler, it's literally the first scene in the book. But they meet each other, they recognize that they are each other's long lost twin sister, and they tell each other about their lives, which is sort of how the book is being told. You see their lives from the beginning to the end to where they are now. I very much enjoyed my reread of this book. It was one of the only books that I actually enjoyed reading whilst in high school for Dutch literature. And I enjoyed it again this time around. I will say though that this book sometimes, it's a thing that Dutch literature has sometimes, is that it's just being weird and difficult for being weird or difficult's sake. It just does that a lot, where it's like, look at it, it's high literature, it's important because it's being so vague and it has double meanings and things like that. This book is not the worst case of it, not by far. There are some Dutch literature books that I had to read that are so much worse with that, and that is also why in general I don't like Dutch literature, because it's so prestigious, or it acts like it's more important or anything. And I guess The Twins has it a little bit, and sometimes it annoyed me a tiny bit. But overall, I also think that it's a wonderful, again, historical fiction story told in a very unique way. And I think it's also a very good opportunity to tell a story from two very different perspectives during something as horrible as World War II, which I always think is very interesting. So overall, I think it's worth a read. And yeah, of course, I had read it before. I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And yeah, again, you can watch that other video if you want to hear more about it and check it out for yourself if you want to. The next book that I finished was an audiobook, and it is The Queen's Gambit by Walter Travis. I think the name is it will probably sound familiar to you because of the very successful Netflix adaptation. But in case you don't know, The Queen's Gambit is about a young girl named Beth who at a very young age becomes an orphan and has to go to an orphanage. There she discovers the game of chess and she becomes obsessed. She is a child prodigy. And then the rest of the book follows her life through the years, and yeah, basically what happens when she can take her chess skills to a professional level. All of this also takes place in around like the 1960s. So again, it's kind of historical fiction, but also this book was written in the 1980s. So yeah, still historical fiction, I guess, because it's still not the time period that it was written in. But yeah, let's get to the actual review. I read this book because I had watched the Netflix adaptation at the beginning of July. Finally, I loved it. I had such a good time watching it, and because of that I was like, well, why not read the book? And it was available in my audiobook library. So I decided to listen to it, and yeah, the book is very similar to the TV show. There are some changes, but overall it's definitely not a lot. So I enjoyed it just as well as the TV show. Yeah, it was just the same story that I still very much liked. I think it's a good and interesting book, and the only thing that I didn't really like was the narrator of this audiobook. Like, I just did not like the way she told the story, because it felt like it was in a very monotone tone. So that is the only downside. Apart from that, I just don't have a lot of deep thoughts, because this was definitely a case of me reading the book because of the adaptation, and when I do that I just don't have a whole lot of new thoughts on it. So maybe not the best book review that I'm doing right now, but yeah, I enjoyed it. Perfectly fine book, very interesting, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next audiobook that I finished in July is The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Day. This is officially, it's a thriller, but personally I find that thriller is kind of a strong word for it. But yeah, I guess a thriller about a young woman named Hannah whose husband mysteriously disappears and he only leaves one note to her which says protect her. And with her he means his 16-year-old daughter named Bailey, who is Hannah's stepdaughter, but they don't really get along all that well. But it turns out that her husband had a lot of secrets and there was a lot about him that she did not know. This book was probably my biggest disappointment of this month because even though I didn't hate it, I thought it was extremely boring. I felt like it was, if you take it back to its basics, it's a very short story. It's just dragged out a lot. Like, you follow these characters almost in real time, which is why it takes an entire book. But if you summarize it, it's just not that much that happens. Personally, I just did not care for the mystery and like what has happened. The answers to that, I did not care for them at all. I wasn't surprised by them. They didn't really do anything for me. I think the thing that I like best about the book is the relationship between Hannah and Bailey and how, you know, stepmother and daughter, it can be a difficult relationship, but it can also be a beautiful relationship. That's the only thing that slightly piqued my interest, but apart from that, I can't say that it's like horrible or bad, but I just felt a whole lot of nothing. Which is not the best with a book. I mean, it was entertaining, I guess. It was a fine audiobook to listen to, but I would never reread it and I don't think it was anything special. So yeah, I guess sort of 3 out of 5 stars, maybe 2.5 out of 5 stars. It did not do anything for me, neither positively or negatively. But then for my next book, I am more positive because next I read The One by John Mars. And this is actually a thriller, I feel like, but yeah, this book takes place in our world, except that scientists have discovered this gene. And with this gene, this biological aspect of a human, they can determine who is your ideal love match. So basically they can see who is the one for you, because there's only one other human in the entire world who has the exact same gene. So that's the premise. Then this book follows 5 different people who recently have taken the test and who might or might not have a match. But this book then also shows you that even though it sounds very ideal, that you can just find the one who is meant for you, in reality it can bring about a lot of problems. For example, the one might not be the same age as you, they might not be available, they might already be married, and even more things like that. It gets a whole lot more intense throughout the book, and wow, I enjoyed it so much. This was the perfect example for like a fun, entertaining book that I had an amazing time reading. I don't think that it's like the best book ever. I don't think that it's like one of my all-time new favorites, but it's one that I had such a good time reading and it was exactly what I was in the mood for at the moment. I loved all the 5 stories. Of course, there were some that were my favorites, but I just had the best time finding out what happens to them and how their match might affect them. Yeah, I guess that's all I can say about it. It was a really fun and entertaining story and I was intrigued, I had a good time. And sometimes that is just exactly what you need from a book. Sometimes it doesn't have to be mind-blowing, it doesn't have to be revolutionary. It just has to be a fun book to keep you entertained. And The One absolutely did that for me. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars because I feel like I've said this 5 times already, but I had such a good time reading it. I also flew through it. It's quite a quick read, so if you're looking for that, this might be the one for you. It had that thrillery aspect that I was craving. It's not like horrifying or anything, but it's, well, I don't know. It's hard to say. But it definitely filled my, thriller, fun, entertaining book craving. So very happy with that. Very happy with this book, and I know there's a Netflix show, but from what I've gathered, that's actually quite different apart from the gene premise, DNA match premise. So I'm not sure if I ever want to watch that, but for the book, if you're looking for a, an entertaining thriller for the summer, this is probably the one for you. And then the final book that I read in July is Moxie by Jennifer Mathieu. This is a young adult contemporary book and it's about a 16-year-old girl named Vivian. Vivian is someone who always follows the rules, doesn't really make any trouble, but at some point she becomes really fed up with all the sexism that is happening at her school. So she starts a feminist zine called Moxie and she distributes it anonymously. And this is the start of a lot of things happening at her school and basically the girls fighting back against all these sexist rules and things that are happening. So with this book, I thought I had grown out of young adult contemporary. I thought it wasn't really for me anymore. But Moxie proved me wrong because boy, this book was so good. I love the premise and how empowering this book is because I read it and I immediately just it really wants to make you become an active feminist straight away. It wants you, like, it made me want to smash the patriarchy and everything. It has so many good points about sexism and things that are happening and how often people just take it for granted, and how these girls are like, no, we're not going to take it for granted anymore. And it was funny, it was strong, and oh, such a strong book. I think it's also a very important book. This is the kind of book that I would have loved to read when I was 16. I think I could definitely have used it. I think this is a book that basically all girls, teenage girls, adult girls, whatever, should read, because I feel like it has such an important message. To be fair, it is still a young adult book and it still has some of the typical young adult tropes when it comes to especially the romance and such, and some of the writing style. I don't think that Vivian as a main character was perfect. She's not meant to be, but of course she is a 16-year-old girl. Those aren't always, you know, they're not adults. They make mistakes. And also the writing style is very much young adult, but I still very much enjoyed it. And I also watched the movie on Netflix afterwards because I was just so inspired. So Moxie, I think this is definitely a book. If you think you're done with young adult, this book will prove you wrong, because now I'm actually excited to read some more young adult again and experience those stories as well. I had a good time reading it, and yeah. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Those were all the books that I read in July. As you can tell, I'm very excited about most of them. I just had such a good month, which is so nice. And I hope August will be amazing as well. I am currently reading Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb, which I'm halfway through, but I haven't finished it yet, so it's not done for this wrap up yet, but that is one that I'm currently reading that I'm very much enjoying as well. And yeah, I guess that is again pretty much it for this video, and I really do hope you have enjoyed it, that you had a good time watching this video. If you did, you can always like it or leave a comment. I always love to read your comments, so just write whatever you want. I love to hear it, and I always really appreciate the support and the engagement, so thank you so much if you do that. You can subscribe if you want to see more of my bookish content. I upload at least once a week, and then hopefully I will see you again in my next video, and until then, bye!